Okay, this video is going to deal with day 2 of Intro to Java, and so we're going to continue on from where we left off yesterday or in our last class. And so you should have your notes open, page 1 of our notes. We've already labeled these panes. We've labeled a couple of these lines in here. We're going to label the rest. I'm going to do it on this screen, however. So we've already labeled this as being the class header in line 1. And first is, of course, the class name, which has to match the name of the file for this class. We've also talked about how these two are print statements. So some other things that we want to label are this. On your notes, go ahead and label this. This is called the main method header. Or it's also called a declaration, the main method declaration. Alright, and so every program has to have the main method. The main method is what actually starts the program. Now, a program that's made up of multiple classes, only one of the classes needs to have the main method. So, the main method header or declaration. Then, here's some other important keynotes. That you have some parameters. You have the class. This is called the opening opening class curly brace. So this is where kind of like where it starts. The class starts here, and the first thing in the class is the main method header or declaration. Now the closing class brace is going to be on the same indentation. So we'll go down to here, and you see that these line up, and so that's how that works. So this lines up with this. This is the opening, and this one is the closing class brace. And so we call that a curly brace, or a brace is fine, but just don't call them brackets, which is many of you are going to want to do that. Okay, then you have the main method header, and that's going to have a body to it. So this is really the body. From the opening to the closing brace is the body of the class. Now the body of the main method is going to go from here. So this is the opening main method curly brace, and then this is the ending or closing main method curly brace. You could use ending or closing, doesn't really matter. Alright, so that gives you parameters on those. And so we'll use those terms occasionally throughout the semester. So now let's go ahead and continue on our notes. And so we're going to fill in some blanks here. So a class must be saved as a Java file. So a Java class must be saved as a Java file before it can be compiled and executed or run. And so we saw that in day 1, where we you can't really compile it unless you save it. It's got to be saved with the right name. The name of the file must match the name of the class. Okay, so the name of the file must match the name of the class. They must be the same as far as spelling goes and as far as capitalization goes. So the name of the file must match the name of the class. An example, if a class name is first, which I probably shouldn't have given that example, then it must be saved as first with a capital F. By default, number 2, save as takes you to the folder you have opened in your left pane. And so we have talked about that, and demonstrated that. So whatever folder you have open, like here's chapter 1 in the left pane, that's where whenever you save as a Java file, it's going to save it in that folder, or it's going to want to. So it's in the left pane, or the navigation pane. In programming, printing means to display output on the screen. So display output on the screen. Right? So it doesn't mean, in this case, it doesn't mean to do a hard copy that we're used to. Okay, so now let's get our make sure we have our JGrasp open with first.java open, and of course it should look like this, and the output of course is going to look like this. Everything looks great. Now what I want you to do is, after I would like you to make the output, instead of looking like this with the 2 lines with the F of the second line below the M of the first line, I would like you to have it so that the F of the second line is below the E of the first line. So we don't want this first line to change at all. We just want the second line to be scooted over so that the F is below the E. So go ahead and stop the video and try it out, compile it, run it, debug it, compile, run it, do it as long as you need to try to see if you can figure out how to make it look like this up here. Ready to go. Okay, so you should have already tried this and hopefully got it to work. Let's just take a look at some things just to solidify in your minds what happens. Let's look at some possible things that people might have tried. So first of all, and to show you also that spaces in here, spaces maybe after the between the ln and the first first parentheses, and to look at the space between the parentheses and the quotation marks. So does that move anything? And so let's go ahead and compile it. So first of all, the compiler doesn't care that I put all those spaces in there. But the other thing is that they have absolutely no effect. It looks exactly the same. That's a good thing to know. And so the only way that this is going to make a difference here as far as your spaces go is if they are, well, obviously within a word you can't do that. That's not going to be good. That's going to cause a compiler error. But the place that's going to make a difference is right here inside the quotation marks. So if you want more spacing in the output is going to be in between these 2 quotation marks. So what we can do is just go to here. Now when we compile it and then run it, now you can see how it actually moved that second line over. Alright, so that's important to know, is that it's your spaces inside the quotation marks. And just a note of interest about this particular font type that's in these JGrasp programs or Java programs is it's important to note that every letter has uses the same amount of space horizontally. So just to give you an example, here are 5 M's, which is M is definitely wider than an I, and here's 5 I's. So in a normal, for instance, the Calibri, it's in that normal type of font type, then yeah, the 5 M's take a lot more space than 5 I's. But once you change this to where you have a font that's like they use in the Java programs, like Courier New, what you see then is they actually take the same amount of space. Alright, so that's really what's happening here, so it makes it easy to count spaces and so forth, so it's very cool to use that. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you go ahead and leave this like this, but maybe hit enter a couple of times, and then in this part here, what I'd like you to do is write code that will produce this output. Make it so you have an X above 2 X's above 3 X's, and that it looks, very nice and like this. So go ahead and pause the video, try to make the output look like this, and then return. Okay, what we should see here is that this is how you would do this. So in your print statement, you're going to have 2 blank spaces and then the X, and then a blank space, an X, blank, and X. And then you have your 2 X's and your space between these 2 X's. And so what happens when you compile it and then you run it, then this is exactly what you'll get. You'll get it looking like what I asked you for. Now, by the way, just to mention, you don't have to type system.out.println all the time, because remember that you can copy and you can paste print statements, and then all you have to do is change what's in the quotation marks. So that's just a note of interest in case you haven't done that yet. That's a good shortcut to use that will save you time. Alright, we'll pause here for a second. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at another important concept. Let's go ahead back now to the second line, first Java application. Let's take away the spaces. So go ahead and do that on your document. And then what I'd like you to do is take this ln in the first print statement and delete it. So this says print and this says println. And then actually we might as well delete these. Oops. Okay, so now let's go ahead and compile it. So you have 2 different types of print statements. You have a print and a println. And some people say println. And we're going to run it and see what it does. Okay, so here's what happens. Now notice it's all on the same line. So here is what happens. When you just say print, all it does is it prints what's inside. We'll call this the argument of the print statement. And then after it's done, the insertion point stays. So it printed my new and improved, and the insertion point stayed right here. And it's waiting for the next output. Now what happens here is in the system.out.println comes along, and so it says to print this first application. So it prints the first Java application from where the insertion point left off. And in all actuality, you see this blank line here. That blank line there is because ln says to go down to the next line. So let's look at this. Let's go back to the ln here. Let's analyze what that does. So when you run that, now here's what's happening. This says print We can do it like this. This says print first, then move insertion point to next line. Alright, so it's print first, and then so print this, and then move the insertion point down to the next line. So what happens is, then it prints my new and improved, but then the insertion point doesn't stay there. The LN says go to the next line, and so the insertion point sits here and waits for the next output. The next output is first Java application, so it outputs that, and then the insertion point moves to the next line. Now you see the space in here. If just to show you something, if we were actually to take and put the take off the LN there, well, let's see what happens there. Okay, so you see how there's no space in here like there is here. That's because the insertion point stayed here and then the program ended. Alright, so that's going to be very important for you to understand, because you can use that strategically in your coding. So understanding the difference between print and println. And so let's go ahead and take a look at our notes. And on our notes we have another place to fill in the blank. So number 4, ln means line. Okay, ln means line, or even, well, we'll just say it means line. Now you can, as L, if you put an I and an E in this, that makes it line. Now print ln means to print what's in the parentheses, then go to the next line. Go to the next line. Print means to print what's in the parentheses and then stay on that line. Okay, which we've already talked about. So print means to print what's in the parentheses, stay on that line. So it takes the next output and puts it right on that same line. So that was what happened here. Alright, so now what I'd like you to do is let's go back to this document. I'd like you to do one thing here. Let's say that we have oh, that's not going to work. Let's say that we have print, so make sure this has print on the first print statement and println on the second statement. What I need you to do is, if you look at this output right here, which that thing's driving me crazy here. So this is the output. Now the compiler didn't care about this output. It followed the Java rules here just fine. When it prints the output, hopefully you see what's wrong with this line. So what I'd like you to do is fix it. Compile it, run it, and make it sure that the output is correct. And then, so pause this, do that, and then come back to the video. Okay, so what you should have done then is, either some of you might have put a space inside the quotation marks, because that's the only way it's going to do any good, after that line, or at the end of the first line, and notice it puts a space in between these two words, which is really what our goal was. Or we might have put the space here. So there's a couple ways that you could have done this, and so either way it gives you the right output. Alright, so that's going to be important to know how to do that. Okay, so now what I need you to do is to put the ln back in the first one, and then delete everything in between the quotation marks. And then I need you to delete everything in between the quotation marks. And then let's copy and paste this. So you have 3 print statements. What I need you to do is use those 3 print statements, make any adjustments you need to make, but you got to have 3 print statements, and I would like you to print it so it says, make it so that the output says year after year, looking just like this, year after year. So go ahead and pause the video, try to make these 3 print statements look like year after year. That's the idea. So give that a shot. Okay, so let's take a look and see what you did. Now, the first thing it says to print year and then go to the next line. Well, that's what the ln says, is to print what's in the parentheses and then go to the next line. So we keep the ln in there. The next line, of course, is going to print after. And then we need a space after R. And then we want it to, now remember, ln says go to the next line. If we go to the next line after, the insertion point then would be down here, and then it would print year. That's not what we want it to do. So what we have to do is take this ln off, and so it'll print after and a space, and then the insertion point will stay right, well, as you can see it right there, the insertion point then will be right here. Okay, what just happened? Why is this not working? Here we are. So here's the insertion point. And the next input then would be year, and so we would type the year in here. There you go. And so if we were then to compile it and run it, oh, oops, these are, by the way, comment symbols that we'll learn about later on, and the compiler will ignore those. So if we then try this again, there you are, year after year. Okay, so let's just look at just another couple things here. So first of all, let's hit the enter key after the first line a couple times. Is this going to change the output? Well, let's compile it, run it, and notice there is no change. Alright, so blank lines, just like the blank spaces like this, don't make any difference, okay? But how can we make the output have a blank line? And so this is going to be very important. We'll be using this later on. So down in here, go ahead and copy and paste one of these print statements, and then take actually you can just remove everything from the parentheses. So basically what you're saying is to print nothing and then go to the next line. And so if we were to compile it and run it, it's going to print nothing. So it's going to print nothing here, go to the next line, and print after and then year. And so therefore that's how you create a blank line. So you'll want to know this for the homework that we're going to be doing tonight. So let's go ahead. Now everything that we've done today is going to be basically included in tonight's homework. And so hopefully you'll be able to make reference to this. Now we're going to go back to our notes and finish something out before we're done with this video, which I apologize is too long. I forgot to break this up into 2 parts. So we're going to go to page 5, and there's a reason why, or page 2, and there's a reason why we're going to finish this out here. We're going to go here and say a computer program on page 2. A computer program is a set of written instructions. Okay, it's a set of written instructions that tell, this probably should say tell, that tell the computer what to do. So in this part here, this is a written instruction that tells the computer to print the word year. This is a written instruction that tells the computer to print after and a space and then stay on the line. See, it's telling the computer to do those things. And so these are instructions, and that's what a computer program does. It is written on a computer program can be written on a text editor like Notepad in Windows, or TextEdit in Macs. And so a Notepad would be something like this. And so if you'll notice, this just normal text, there's nothing fancy about it, and there's really not a lot of formatting to do. I can't really, if I change the font size or the font type, then it's going to change the entire document. I can't change part of it and bold just part of it. There's no color in here that I know of. There's no color, anything like that. It's just a basic text editor. And so that's Notepad. Now it's in a let's see, how do we want to say this? We'll say it like this: in a developmental environment. Okay, so a developmental environment like JGrasp. Oh, I guess I already have environment there. So this is JGrasp is a developmental environment for people learning how to program, because it's got the colors in here, for strings here that we'll talk about later, and you're able to compile, you're able to run the program and test your program and test the output, whereas in Notepad you can't. You just type the program, and it's a lot more difficult. It's as far as to test your program and then to make changes. So that is, let's see. Alright, so we're going to stop here, and that's it.